Hello, and welcome to the Porcelain Don channel. This is my spoiler review for House of Chains. Hello, and welcome to the Porcelain Don channel. As I said, this is my spoiler discussion for the fourth book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series, House of Chains by Steven Erikson. Now, this is a big book, and I've got a lot to say, so I have a few notes. So if you see me looking away bizarrely, then that's why. I don't normally like to do notes whilst I'm reading, whilst I'm talking. I can normally remember it pretty well. But there's a lot going on in this book that I want to discuss, so please forgive me. Anyway, this book, if you've seen my spoiler-free review, you'll see that I enjoyed it, but I found it quite the departure from what we'd seen previously in the books by Erikson. Thoroughly enjoyed it though, but there's a lot going on. So let's begin. Let's start with Casa. Casa. Thalomen Toblekai. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. I'm sure it's not sounding like Toblerone, but that's how I'm reading it. What a complex character. I mean, simple and yet complex at the same time. Because he's quite simplistic in his motivations, especially at the start. You know, at the start, he's this Titan-esque child, obsessed with glory and war and, you know, trampling his enemies underfoot and honor and things like that. And he's kind of a buffoon, you know? Like, you're thrown off by his size and everything, but he's still a child and he's very, very immature. And he's detestable. Really, he's quite detestable, you know? Very early on, he, you know, sexually assaults, let's say. I don't know how I can say it on YouTube. He sexually assaults some tribeswomen. He murders a lot of people. Again, culturally they're enemies, but they're the same race. But it's, I mean, he's immoral, very immoral. And the way he sees the world is very, very narrow. You know, he laments the faded glory of his people. And he wants to see them going back to their former glory. And he talks about, you know, his grandfather, how he attacked the children, even the fact they refer to humans as children and they want to kill them, you know, even though they're not actually children. It's still distasteful, you know, just talking about killing children. I'm sure it's deliberate. I mean, it's certainly deliberate by Erikson to play it this way and to make us not like him in this way. Anyway, Casa goes on his voyage of discovery, his voyage of conquest, with his allies, Delium Thord and Beroth Guild, who seem, whilst they are his tribesmen, they seem a lot more mature, you know, a lot more grown up. Maybe not his match militarily or strength-wise, but in terms of their heads, they're a lot more switched on, a lot more modern-ish sensibilities, you could say. I don't know. But yeah, Casa goes on this voyage with these guys, and they meet another character that's quite interesting, Calm, the Forkrilla Sail, which I found scary because she dominated them so easily, and she was pinned under this rock, and yet still alive for what seemed like a very long time. So I think this is the first Forkrilla Sail, although we've heard of them, or the name rings a bell. I'm interested to see what they bring in future stories, but they seem to be terrifying, because if they can easily dominate 3 prime Toblekai warriors, then it's a little alarming. But anyway, the Casa story, he goes on his voyage, he attacks this town, he gets captured, he gets made into a slave, he meets Torvald Nom, which I think is very cute. You know, there's Torvald Nom, and then we already know Ralik Nom, and he's like, yeah, I'm a distant relation of Noms in Darujistan. Very clever, a very small tidbit, but very clever of Erikson to put it in and make it feel like it's an interconnected world and it's a living world. It's just a tiny little thing, but it's very calculated and very well done, I thought. But there's so much complexity to the Casa character, you know, like when the way he treats Silga, when he cuts off his hands and feet, you think, yeah, this guy's awful, but it's cruel and unusual punishment. You know, when what he does to Bidithal at the end, it's really, really at the same time brutal and unsatisfying, because Bidithal is the worst character. Yeah, he's the worst character. And he does awful things, and you're just waiting. At least I was. You're waiting through a large part of the book. After he does what he does, you find out what he does to children, you find out what he's going to do, and what he does do to Felisin. You think, first of all, you want Toblakai to get back, or Leoman, or anyone to do something. We want Toblakai to get back and find out before, and then especially after, you want, it's so distasteful and painful what he does, that you want Casa to come back and destroy him, and it's over so quickly. And that was my complaint. Yes, it was kind of brutal, but it was over so quickly. I wanted him to really suffer. Even though he's a fictional character, I was worked up. So yeah, that part was interesting. And the confrontation with Icarium also very, very interesting, because as I think I've said before, you have Chekhov's Icarium and his legendary anger, and you think Toblakai, I keep calling him Toblakai, Casa and him, they sort of eyeing each other like two alpha males, even though Icarium is a lot more peaceable, but seemingly much stronger. At least that's what Mappo thinks. That's why he knocks out Casa, because he's not trying to protect Icarium. I think, as is his job the whole way through, he's trying to protect the world from Icarium. Even though he values Icarium as a friend, you don't seem to get any feeling whatsoever that he's worried about his health. He's worried about his morale, his sanity, his emotional well-being, which is very touching. But in terms of danger from Casa, you get no feeling whatsoever that he's worried that Casa is going to hurt him, which just begs the question, after all the things we see Casa do, and we see him do some really impressive feats of strength and feats of military might. So how tough is Icarium? What makes him so tough? What makes him such a demon? He's half Jag, and from the description, maybe half human. And we've seen the Jaggeds that are very powerful, but I mean, they get killed. They get killed by hundreds of thousands of Telanimas, and you would think Casa would have maybe not. He's immune to magic, more or less, and he's incredibly powerful. So you think, but what is it about Icarium? What happened to Icarium? So many questions. Why is he so powerful? Why is he so angry? What happened in the past? Because every time we get a little tidbit of Icarium from the past, it's whatever time it was, more or less, Icarium was there, and he was a danger, or he destroyed something, or he lost his temper, or he built something beautiful. Anyway, he's littered throughout. Yeah, going back to Casa, as I said in the spoiler-free review, it was sort of a hero's journey where he's going on a quest, and the quest that he doesn't know is a quest of discovery, to discover about himself, to discover about the way of the world. And at the end, he's portrayed as different. And you can see that by the fact that he decides not to fight Tavor and her army, which is so silly but so fun, where he's like, you're not my enemy, or something, or we're not going to fight, or something. And against the whole army. He's basically by himself, and it's Tavor and the whole army. And, that's meant to be a sign that he's grown. but he's still, uber violent, uber bent on war. Does he regret his past deeds? He says he was foolish, but foolish, for believing his grandfather over his father. But he never seems to really lament his warlike nature or lose his warlike nature. Obviously, there's many books to come, so I don't know how the character is going to grow. But he seems to have grown on a superficial level, but you don't see that he's grown in any way in terms of in terms of character and beliefs. I think that's what I felt, at least. So it was very interesting to see how Erikson did that and what the goal of that will be in the books to come. Like, does he go back to the Tableau, the Tolbukai, and sort of tell them the truth of the world and try to rally them, which would lead to more war to sort of defend themselves? Because as we learn, they're being hemmed in by progress, essentially, humanity doing what it does, like cockroaches, just sort of agglomerating everywhere and hoovering up all the resources. So what are his new goals? He's despicable all the way throughout. As I said, he does terrible things. Even at the end, he does terrible things, but for good reasons. Is he a character that we should like? And that poses a lot of questions, because we do like him or I'm speaking of myself, but I think most of the readers do like him because of how brazen and barefaced he is. He doesn't have fear. He's direct. He attacks whatever, and he usually comes out on top. He's extremely powerful and extremely able, and seeing somebody like that in a book like this, you're always thinking, yeah, that's a badass, or that's a badass moment, or things like that. So you do root for him and you do enjoy him, but at the same time, like, he's more or less the main character of this book, but he is immoral, and not in a morally great way. He's morally black. He does some terrible things. So I'm really interested to see more from him, to see more what Erikson does, to see where he takes him, because he will always, I think, have his military ability, but what more comes from his character? We're learning more of the world, seeing more of the world, experiencing more of the world. Does he come to regret not just his foolish decisions to attack these people, but like who he was, his beliefs, like, and probably won't be addressed, but the sexual assault, that's kind of heinous, completely disgusting. So it gave me a lot of questions and a lot of pause to think about this character. It's a really complex character. He's a simple character that makes us think in a complex way about him, if that makes sense. Anyway, waffling about him, I'm going to go on to Tavor. So Tavor we met in Memories of Ice at the beginning. Oh, no, not Memories of Ice. Was it Memories of Ice or Dead House Gates? One of them, we meet her in the beginning with the Tavors, with the Parans, and she's a jerk. She's a real jerk. But now we find out she's the adjunct, replacing Lorne, who was adjunct for 5 pages or something before she was brutally done in the first book. And now she's come with her army of recruits, essentially, useless recruits, green, to retake 7 cities. And it seems like a very difficult task. You have the whirlwind, you have the riot, you have Shaikh Reborn, you have all this stuff, and it seems like her army is falling apart before it's even begun. And Tavor is another complex character, because we see almost nothing of her, and that's very deliberate. I think we see what the soldiers see, which is very much a stoic, stolid stoic, stolid character. She's very direct. She seems quite young, but she's very focused, and I think she portrays that to us and her soldiers to cover the fact that she's young. Doesn't matter that she's a woman so much. I think in this world, there's so many women soldiers that are excellent soldiers. So I don't think her being a woman in the world is that much of an issue, but her being young and untested, perhaps. and just plucked, it seems, by Lasine, the Empress, to lead this army, makes some of her sub-lieutenants or leaders below her have doubts, which I think echoes what some of the soldiery has for her too. But yeah, she's portrayed in a very, very out of reach, distant way. So we didn't really get to know much about her other than this, which already told us, what Erikson wanted us to know. But I think she does a great job as a leader. But I think her sub-lieutenants do most of the work, fetching and carrying. So, like, for example, at the end, there was a moment for real emotion when she kills her sister, Felisin. Like, obviously she cares about Felisin. She sent Bordin, R.I.P. Bordin, what a hero, to protect her. But she also turned in her family and turned in Felisin. So that's very brutal. But like when she kills her sister, she doesn't know. And I think she never knows. At least the way it's written, it seems like in this book, maybe she finds out in the future, but she never knows that it's her sister. And that would have been an interesting test or an interesting window to see the reality of her character. But I think Erikson didn't do that to keep her as she is going forward. Anyway, not a very engaging character, but an interesting character. So yeah, another one that I'm interested to see what's going on going forward. And then we have the Malaz 14th Army. Interesting bunch of characters, fun, much like the Bridge Burners. They all have these very fun names that are easy to remember. They're all very fun characters. The interactions between one and the other are really what make Malazan. It's just the small talk between the soldiers and the joking is what makes these books great. They're distinctly not the Bridge Burners. And as we've spent many books falling in love and getting heartbroken by the Bridge Burners, having these new guys come in, it feels like they're the replacements. So that's why I thought it was absolutely brilliant to have brought in Strings, aka Fiddler, who was kind of the glue in the Bridge Burners that we saw, to come and be the glue and the voice of reason. And that way it transfers our Bridge Burners affection, because Fiddler is a Bridge Burner, so it transfers some of our Bridge Burners affection to the 14th Army. So very cleverly done. So we do have a bit of affection for them, but they're not the Bridge Burners. You know what I mean? I want some more Bridge Burners, but these guys were still really great. So I'm just going to turn the page. But yeah, Erikson is really a master. I think I've said this before, but it bears repeating. Erikson is really a master of secondary and tertiary characters, of making, like, the main characters are all great, but a lot of people do main characters great. But what Erikson does, other than extreme world building, is his secondary and his tertiary characters are so memorable, just because of the dialogue they have, or they seem so real and so distinct and so memorable. Just like Torvald, Nom, Minala, Pella, these guys are barely in it, but you can remember them. I'm sure, in 5 years, 10 years, I'll remember them, just because. But he does that with so many. He does that with so many characters, and that's what gives this a richness. He gives his writing and his worlds a richness, because they're populated by real people, in the sense that they're fully fleshed out. Even if they get 2 or 3 lines, or just half a chapter or whatever, we meet these characters and we feel these characters, and it's so well done. And for me, that's the secret. That's the secret to Malazan, at least so far. Yes, the spectacles are epic and amazing. Yes, the world building is so rich and so intense and so laborious and so gratifying. But what carries it on, what gives it these charm, is these secondary and tertiary characters. It's really the heartbeat, if you will, for the Malazan series so far, for me. Yeah, but then the 14th Army, they get it. They go through all these trials, and then they fight, and there's back and forth, and then you have the battle at the end. The Bridge Burners ascended, which is awesome, you know. I don't really know how that works, but they come back as ghosts and kick a bunch of asses, like the Army of the Dead in Lord of the Rings, sort of. Um, it was amazing. It was great to see them. It was charming and wistful, and the battle was excellent. Cotillion does his business. Love Cotillion, one of my favorite characters. Every little bit that he's in it, it's awesome. He's a real badass, but he seems to have a heart. You know, he seems to care about these people. Um, and yeah, that was just magic. Yeah, Heberic becomes a destriant of Treach. Now, a destriant is like a mouthpiece, or like one of the avatars, because you have the mortal sword. I'm taking this from the grey swords from Memories of Ice, but it seems to be a similar structure. However, you have the mortal sword, which is kind of like the champion. You have the destriant, which was a healer in the grey swords, but I don't know if that's related to his title. But it seems to be like the avatar, the representative of the god. And there's a third one that escapes me. But anyway, Heberic, formerly priest of Fenna, who abandoned Fenna and got his arms chopped off, becomes unwillingly destriant of Treach, the new ascended god of war from a first hero. That's somewhat self-explanatory, but a bit confusing also. Just as he was going to lose, like failing physically, and then he becomes the destriant. He doesn't want it, he rejects it, but he seems kind of mad. Also, he seems a little bit mad. He's a complex character. I say that a lot, but there's a lot going on in, like, he seems to be struggling to find his role in the whirlwind. Before, he obviously cares for Felisin, but it's sort of a love-hate relationship, because he loves the innocence of her, the innocent potential, but he hates what she's become and is becoming and what she's done. So he transfers a lot of that to young Felisin, but he failed to protect her too. So it's complicated. Like, he's not a character that I like a lot. He's a character that I appreciate, but he's not one that I like a lot. And then you have Lostara and Pearl on the trip. Pearl, the snake, what is it called? Sulky Land, something like that in the other book. Absolute weasel, betrayed Callum. Obviously, Callum being bulletproof essentially was fine, but I'm sure he's not happy about it. I'm sure it's going to come back to bite him. Both are great characters, likable and disliked. Pearl is very annoying. He's a massive jerk. He's slimy, but he's engaging, you know. He seems to have this, I know so much about the world, and Lostara fills in for the audience in this way, and that Pearl expounds on the world and shows her stuff and tells her stuff that we as the audience would need to know, which is very, very clever, but often done. You have, yeah, like I mentioned, you have the tease of Ikari and Kasa, the unstoppable, the immovable object versus the unstoppable force. What would have happened? And it seems to be painted by all accounts that Ikarian would have wiped Kasa out, and probably most of the continent, it sounds like. I don't know. He seems like a overpowered, let's say the least. But I really, really am curious, because he's such a sweet and sad, tragic figure, even though it seems that he's only ever done, on a holistic scale, bad. You know, he might have been nice to one or two people, but it seems he's killed thousands and destroyed cities and done all this stuff, which you see that it would break his heart thinking of this and doing this. So what's the switch, and why is the switch there? Anyway, summary. This book was complex, probably the most complex in terms of questioning the reader and grayness. Because the first three books were complex in terms of structure, in terms of exposition, in terms of, you know, learning about Warrens, learning how these characters relate to these characters, learning the political structures and the aims. But this one was much more complex in terms of, how does this make me feel? Who do I like? Who do I dislike? Why do I like them? Why does it make me feel this certain way? It really makes you question the nature of heroism, you know? Because you can be heroic without being a hero, or you can be a hero without being heroic. And there's just a lot in it from a plethora of different characters. They all have more heroic and less heroic moments. It's much more realistic in that way. Also on the nature of storytelling, because as I said in the spoiler review, the first books keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then this one narrows it down really small to just cast a story, and then it spreads out again, but it's really just sort of around Rereku, more or less, you know? It seems a lot less dispersed than even no, maybe the first one, because it's mostly around Darujistan. It seems kind of the same. But the first one, because it's so new, it still feels massive because the world is so rich, and you see Pale, and you see Anamanda Rake and Moonspawn, and all these different things. So it does seem a lot bigger. Whereas this one seems very localized. Obviously, a conscious choice by Erikson to sort of build it up and then narrow it down, almost like a drum and bass DJ, you know, that builds it up and then calms people down, because you can't have people on 11 forever. Probably showing my age with the drum and bass reference. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, once again, Erikson shows that he's like a master composer, just setting out the notes as they need to be. And I'm sure going back down, this book would have alienated some people because they were on such adrenaline highs from the grandiosity of the other books, that when it comes to this, and it was just, you know, there was a big battle at the end, but even that, we missed most of it because it was done by ghosts, you know? So, and it was done sort of off screen, if you will. So even that, you know, it was a big departure from the other books, even though there was some incredible action in this book. But that's the word, departure. It is quite a departure from what we've seen so far, and I'm sure a lot of people were just thrown by it, you know. So let me know below what you thought when you read this the first time, how it made you feel after the other three. But yeah, this book, the world building, 11 out of 10 as always. Characters, 11 out of 10. Excellent. Probably my third favorite or fourth favorite, as I mentioned in the spoiler-free review, of the series so far. Even though it's a great book, it's just Deadhouse Gates and Memories of Ice are really masterpieces, you know. Very different, the two. Very different, but just one was maximalism. You know, Memories of Ice was just so much. So many, like it could have been 5 great books, but it was one incredible, unforgettable book. And then Deadhouse Gates was so involved and so emotional and so beautiful, so beautifully written and so beautifully paced, and just the ending was so sad, and it was just really a wonderful experience reading that book. One was great, it was interesting, it was the introduction to the Malazan world, slightly rougher written than the other ones, but still excellent. And then this one, again, very, very good, but a little less wow than the other two, than 2 and 3. But still, excellent. I would recommend, I mean, I'm going to stop recommending Malazan books because you're not going to read the 4th one. I'm just going to say, if you haven't started the series, please don't get this far in this video for the spoilers. Tell your friends to read it. It's amazing. Most people won't like it because it's very complex and a difficult read in certain aspects. But I'm all aboard. I love this series. I cannot wait to read book 5. No idea what's going to come, but I'm here for it. Anyway, thank you so much for staying this long for this video. I hope it made some sense to you. Please like and subscribe. That would really help. And don't forget to stay tuned for whatever's coming next on the channel. Thank you so much. Bye bye.